Jo, thank you so much for taking the time and welcome to Director's Notes.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, wanted to talk to you about your film Bazigaga. So, it's an incredibly powerful, this is your directorial debut.
It is, yes.
How did you find the story and what made you want to tell it?
So I came across the story a few years ago at the Kigali Genocide Memorial. And I was sort of looking into my family's history during that time. And I had lots of questions about the history of the country, and I really wanted to get into it and sort of really familiarize myself with that, because for a long time when I was in the UK, I pretended to be from Burundi because being Rwandan was not a great association. So when I was ready, I thought I will do this, and I went to the museum, and I came across the story of Zura Karuhimbi, which is just the most incredible story of this woman who was quite advanced in age, sort of middle-aged woman, who decided to save people using witchcraft or the threat of witchcraft. And ironically, she was so good at convincing people that she was a witch doctor that she spent the rest of her life post genocide telling people that actually I am not a witch doctor. Such was her performance, so convincing it was during the genocide that people genuinely believed that she was a witch doctor, but she wasn't. So during the genocide, she saved people. She had people in her house, over 200 Tutsis in her house. I mean, it's a tiny house. I have no idea how she did it. And so when people came to hunt for them, she would make lots of noises. She would threaten curses, and they left her. They left her to it. People, men, the militias of men
Yeah.
armed with guns, with grenades, with machetes, were scared of her. And I just found that that's just to be the most astonishing thing, firstly, because it was such a courageous thing to do. But the question was, why were people who had all the power afraid of this tiny little woman who was threatening magic? It's just words. It's such a bizarre power to possess on her part. And I
Yeah.
thought I really want to know more about this, because I thought it tells so much about Rwandan society, but also what was happening at the time. So then I delved into her story, and I discovered more powerful women really during the genocide, because most of the stories you hear about the genocide are of women as victims, and there are many. There are many heartbreaking stories. Because at the time, rape was a weapon of war, widely used. But then there's these untold stories, unknown stories of women who did incredibly heroic things, and
Mm.
also women who did incredibly horrific things to other women, and to help in terms of the genocide effort as was rolled out by the government. So that is how I came upon her story, and I knew that if I was ever going to tell the story of Rwanda this time, this is the story I had to tell.
It's this beautiful allegory between, the suffering and the prejudice that the shaman had alongside that of the pastor. So, how did you take this idea and then build it into a film script?
Initially, I wanted to tell the story of Zura, but then I came to Rwanda and was about to interview her, and a few weeks later she passed. So before I could meet her, which was such a tragedy, I feel like most of my time in Rwanda, even during the genocide, I was just a few meters away from her, but we never really met.
Oh, wow.
And I felt like I could not do her justice. I couldn't tell her story, having never spoken to her in person. So that is why I thought, if I'm going to pay homage to her, that's the best I could do. If I'm not going to do an autobiographical piece, this is what I would do. But then the most fascinating aspect of what she did was the religious aspect of her character, of
Yeah.
her story. And so that's what I really wanted to explore, and the mysticism, the role of mysticism in Rwandan society, but as well as during that time, because it played, oddly enough, such an important role. People who were like saved by her, or people who were saved by Muslims, for instance, had a better chance of survival than people who fled to churches. Um, and that's a whole other theological exploration of what happened at the time. But also, it had, the role religion had such an important hold in Rwandan society. It still does. And also, there's the role of Christians in the genocide is appalling and quite scary once you delve into it. So I wanted to create a world where all these things, all these layers, are contained. And that's why I wanted to bring two people together who are from different walks of life. So the pastor, the male pastor, male Tutsi pastor versus the Hutu older single shaman. And they represent lots of different aspects really of Rwandan society and that time. And I really wanted to distill all of that into two characters who are not just sort of archetypes of people, but real people who meet together and decide to, if they're going to survive, to see each other as humans rather than what they represent to each other.
I mean, it is amazing. This sort of, like you said, you were building those layers, and there are layers under layers under layers in the story. One of the things that struck me the most as well is you've got these really sort of poignant moments of silence. I think, you've got all of the brutality and the chaos outside. What were you looking for in order to build those horrible feelings of tension?
I wanted to add silence, and I think it's such an important thing that you pointed out, because it was silence usually is something associated with peace or tranquility. But in a setting like this, you realize that silence means something completely different. And I find it to be really menacing, because you have the people outside sort of guarding them, sort of shouting, partying. And then, of course, you have the radio, which is sort of the spewing the hate and updating them on what's happening, that constant noise that is sort of buzzing around them all the time. And in those moments of silence, as I think people who've been in war zones will testify, are the scariest, because you don't know what's happening. It could very well be the calm before the storm. So I found those moments of silence when it seems like very little is happening are actually the scariest. And I felt like that really was a good way of sort of containing what was happening, adding the tension, like you say. But I also like those are the moments when you see the people, when you see the characters for the humans that they are, rather than what's happening to them.
Yeah. And another thing as well, so you've got these beautiful moments of silence, and everything really takes place in that one tiny house, and mainly, in that room. But you created such a sort of fleshed out and vibrant world. How did you go about creating that, just filming in that one area?
So that room is inspired by my grandmother's house. and I wanted to bring that. I knew that if I could create that, and with it sort of quirks and the decor, and we had an amazing set designer helping us in that. In itself, it's a world, and the world of the witch doctor. I mean, Zura Karuhimbi, who inspired the story, was a traditional healer. And I have these memories of going to people's houses like that, or even Rwandan countryside in 1994. That house had so much in it. It was a world unto itself. So I really wanted to bring that to life. And I felt like if I could be authentic to that and create the house and bring all sort of drawing from my memories of childhood and bring that world. It's a world that's just cinematic. You don't really need to do much just to see a home of a woman who's pretending to be a witch doctor, which is her stage. It is very much her stage. That room is her stage where she can perform this role that she's been given. But also it adds to the sense of claustrophobia when you realize that this is her world, this is her domain, and the pastor comes in and he's very much the outsider. That in itself creates a lot. So you don't really have to do very much. And that sense of being under siege is very, very important to the story, which is why I kept everything in that room. And you can bring in the world, but also the world through the radio and through other means. But essentially, it is the story of these two people, which is why I didn't want much else to distract from that. And these two people facing each other in this room. So that was the focus, and that's what I really wanted to spend time in.
Yeah. And I read that you didn't shoot in Rwanda, you shot in La Réunion.
We did, yes.
Yeah, but there's this there's a beautiful aerial shot. I think you're looking down on the village, and there's there's a calm which, you know, doesn't reflect what's actually going on. How did you find the right location that felt authentic to you?
So the exterior shots are actually shot in Rwanda. So
Okay.
that's the only way I could bring Rwanda into it. The actual shoot, the interior is all set in La Réunion, but the exterior shots are in Rwanda, Rwandan countryside, where Zula's house would have been in Ruhango in Rwanda. And I wanted to bring that sense of calm because although there was massacres happening, it was just normal life was going on for a lot of people. And it was just an average day. I'm in the process of speaking to people about the experiences in the war, and it's such a shocking divide of people who are hiding in just the most desperate places, and other people's lives that was just normal. It was just a normal Tuesday. Their life was completely unaffected. So I wanted to bring both of that sort of aspect of life during the time to the screen.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to show, but also it is quite scary and adds sort of the menace of what is happening at the time.
It does, but that came across, you know, so poignantly. And sort of another thing as well, talking about that sort of clash between the menace and the just calmness, is the colors that you've got. They're very rich. They're sort of evocative of the beauty of the country, but at the same time, you've got all of this going on. How did you capture that? What were you looking for in your tone?
In terms of color palette, which I sort of designed with an incredible cinematographer called Thomas Bremont, we wanted to create a world of paradise lost.
Okay.
And because it is this Rwanda is just stunning. It's a stunning country, and in April would have been a sort of rainy season when nature everything comes to life. It's so lush. The greens are super lush. The fruit is harvest time as well, so there's fruit hanging everywhere. It's very much a very alive country during April, which is April to June, which is the time period where this film is set. So we wanted to bring that to life because all of these horrible things were happening to people. Nature was very much thriving. And I wanted to juxtapose those two aspects, that even in this beautiful country, these beautiful settings, all these horrible things are happening.
How did you then come back? You've got all this footage, you've got things from Rwanda, you've got things from La Réunion. How did you put it all together into the final film we see?
So we edited in Belgium because this film is a co-production, sort of French, British, and Belgian co-production. The first cut, as every directorial test is scary. I remember the first time we had all the Russians looking at everything, and I thought, I don't have a film. I don't have a film. And it's a short film, so I can't reshoot anything, and it's raining, so I can't go back. And it's the middle of COVID. I have no film, and I was terrified. But we worked with the most incredible post-production team. Belgium is incredible, and in this particular instance, Brussels, we were able to sit down and go through the rushes and get the things we wanted. I didn't get everything I wanted, and I suppose that's the first thing you notice when you're thinking, oh, that's the shot I should have got. And it was a very tight shoot, 4 days in La Réunion. And again, it's a short film, so budgets are limited. And we were working with a crew well out of our range, so they allotted us a specific amount of time. So we couldn't go back and say, oh, this didn't work, we reshoot this. There's just no room for that. So we assembled what we had, and luckily in the end we had a coherent narrative and blessed by incredible post-production team that did just wonders on it.
And I mean, how does it feel to you to be BAFTA nominated and to have your film on such a brilliant platform?
A BAFTA nomination, honestly, I was not expecting that. Most people say that, but I genuinely thought it was just so left field. But it is an incredible honor because this is a film in Kinyarwanda, a Rwandan story. I'm Rwandan British, but you never think like a film's this personal, this authentic would be up for Best British I didn't think it would be, to be honest. I haven't seen films like this nominated before. So it's such a huge honor to have a story that means obviously a lot to me, but as somebody who's been working in the film, to make films like this that have given such a platform is really rare. It is incredibly rare. So I'm very grateful for that, and very surprised still, to be honest. But yes, I'm very pleased that we'll have a different narrative coming from Rwanda, where women are heroes, women are saviors, which is something again rare to see. And I'm really proud of the team that all came together to make this film, because it took us a long time to make it, and I'm glad that in the end we worked with the people that we did. Clearly somebody likes it, so I'm very glad to see that.
So, I mean, the press is on now. What are you working on next?
I'm working on a few different things. I'm developing the feature version, and I'm very interested in working on stories like this, stories that I think African stories that most people don't think would get, be seen by anybody, because I used to think like that. I used to think no one wants to film like this, but then you make it and people are actually interested, and you're surprised that there is attention for such content. So I've been in Rwanda for a little bit, doing a lot of research about African stories, and I'm developing a few things on that, because I think there is so much that we can offer to the world in terms of stories and cinema, and in such a, I think it's a very nascent scene and African cinema at the moment, but I think there's so much we can offer to the wider world. And in this day and age, I don't think audiences need to limit themselves to a particular kind of cinema.
No.
And why not? Why?
No, absolutely.
Anyway,
exactly. Well,
exactly.
your BAFTA nomination proves that point as well. It proves that audiences and everything are hungry for new content and different viewpoints, and that's exactly what you've brought, which is just fabulous.
Absolutely. No, I am very pleased. I'm very pleased. You sort of hope that when you make something like this, you do hope that there is an audience for it. And clearly there is.
Yeah.
And again, it's like a film made by Africans in an African language with subtitles, and still people are interested and really respond to it and get it, like with the conversation we're having, all those things, that all these intentions that I put it into it, all the things that I wanted people to get from that, they come across. So there is no barrier in terms of cinema, in terms of how people interpret stories or tell them. Cinema, being the wonderful thing that it is a universal language.